Welcome to the Global News Podcast on YouTube, where we go behind the headlines to find out about a major story and why it matters. I'm Janat Jalil, and joining me today is our cyber correspondent, Joe Tidy. And Joe, you've managed to speak exclusively to a kingpin in the world of cybercrime. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's no exaggeration to say that Tank, as he was known, real name, Vyacheslav Penchikov, was one of the top dogs of Russian-speaking cybercrime. And he had this fascinating career of being at the top of a group called the Jabba Zeus crew in the late 2000s.
And can you just explain that name for us?
Yeah, sure. So the malware that they were using was called Zeus.
After the Greek god.
Exactly. And it was part of this group of banking Trojans. So what that does is, very sophisticated at the time, they find a way to hack your computer. They were going after medium and small size businesses. And then when you do your business banking, instead of you sending money to the bank, you're sending money to them, and they can come in, they can take that money. So the Jabba bit of the Jabba Zeus crew name comes from the fact that they managed to adapt that Zeus malware to give them a message on a platform called Jabba, a messaging service. So whenever they got into a victim's account, they would have a little ding that comes up on their computer saying, we've got one. And the other thing about Tank is that he had this sort of years off. Once he'd done the Jabba Zeus crew and they were all arrested, he wasn't. He managed to get away from police. Then he went into, he started a business selling coal, tried to go straight, but then he claims he was being shaken down by the authorities. So he got back into cybercrime. And that's when he got into the kind of stuff that we see today. Ransomware, one of the biggest problems in cybersecurity right now.
But just tell us how he started, because he started pretty small, didn't he?
Yeah, he started as a teenager, which is shocking to some people, but actually, that is where all hackers start. Normally, there's this kind of pathway that we have seen, and I've done lots of stories on sort of English-speaking cyber criminals where they get into gaming. So, a teenage boy normally obsessed with games, and they start learning how to cheat in that game to beat their friends. And then they move from breaking games and hacking games into hacking other things to try and get money and power and infamy, and then on to sometimes serious cybercrime, which is what happened to Penchikov. But I just found that absolutely fascinating when I talked to him, because there is this sort of parallel between, he's Ukrainian, Russian-speaking Ukrainian. He went down the exact same path that we see all the time in English-speaking cybercrime as well. There's this kind of like universal pathway to cybercrime, it seems. And this is what he told me about how he started.
We set up fake websites selling fake goods, then use stolen credit card details to buy those products from ourselves. The credit card companies would pay out like it was a real sale. It was a popular trick.
Did you ever feel guilty?
We didn't think about consequences. We wanted freedom, independence from our families.
What were you buying?
Beer, good clothes, expensive shoes, and I would show off the money at school. What teenager doesn't like to brag about? I was changing cars like changing clothes.
How many did you have?
At one point, I had 6. All expensive German ones.
And not only that, Joe, but he was a DJ by night.
Yeah, DJ Slava Rich was his DJ name. I think that was a bit of a sort of side hobby, really. He was obviously doing very well in cybercrime by this stage. So he started, what you heard there was him talking about, his... But I think he was about 15, 16, 17. Then he got into the serious stuff, like the Jabba Zeus stuff, when he was about 20 or so. But yeah, he's had an absolutely enormous career in cybercrime, which has stretched about 15 years, and probably more, in fact, when you think about the early things he's talking about there. But now he is facing justice and he's in prison.
But it did take a long time, didn't it, for the authorities, including the FBI, to catch him?
Yeah, he was on the FBI Most Wanted list for nearly 10 years. But even before that, 5 years before that, he was part of this big operation, international operation between the UK and Russia and Ukraine and the US to try and take down the Jabba Zeus crew. And they managed to arrest most of the guys from that gang. They went after Slava Penchikov, and he won't admit this. He won't say that this is what happened, but a lot of people in the law enforcement say that he got some sort of tip-off from the authorities when he was in Ukraine and managed to evade capture.
And this was in the early 2010s?
That's right, yeah. And then one of the fascinating parts of his story, he says that when the heat was on him the most from the Ukrainian authorities, he actually used one of those very expensive cars we just heard about to get away from police in a car chase and evade capture. And then eventually the police sort of just lost interest, and he went straight, But then, as I say, he got drawn back into cybercrime, and that's when he got into ransomware and did some very serious stuff.
And he was sounding very blasé, but what he was also telling you about his time in prison was that he'd used it to better himself, to improve his English, to get fit, which for his victims will be quite a bitter thing to hear.
I think it will be, and the other thing is, he's in a low security prison. We don't know when he'll be out, but it's an 18-year sentence, but that's 2 9-year sentences served concurrently. And he seems to be in good spirits, good health. He has got a very charming way about him, I have to be honest there. He didn't get to the top of the cybercrime tree in those 2 periods of cybercrime history through his technical skills. It was, and he will admit this, I'm a friendly guy, I make friends, and he's a very personable guy. But in prison, yeah, as you say, he's learning different languages, playing lots of sports. We went there, and he's in his prison fatigues, but he's in good shape, and he clearly spends a lot of time outside. He's still very bitter about being in prison. He knows what he did was wrong, but he doesn't seem to think it was as bad as the US authorities would say. He doesn't seem to have that much remorse, really, for some of the victims. And we spoke to some of them for our story, and one of them was a sort of mom and pop shop called Lieber's Luggage in Albuquerque, and they had a float of money in their bank which they used for rent and for paying staff, that kind of thing. Not a large amount of money, only $12,000, but the Jabazoos gang and Tank stole it, and that set off a chain of situations for the family that was extremely stressful. The company survived, but hearing the kind of human impact of that hack really brought home to me that there's a real disconnect between people like Penchikov and other cybercriminals who don't see the victims, they don't feel the anguish of the victims, and the victims themselves who say, no, it's not just money, this is a huge amount of stress. The woman who runs the Lieber's Luggage, she said that her mum was, as a favour to the family, doing the accounts at the time when the hack happened, and she was an elderly lady, and it was really, really horrible because this poor lady blamed herself for the money going missing, and then the bank got involved, and it was a real horrible time. And we put that to him, and he said, well, yes, it's all on insurance. I think the feeling is that Western countries and companies, they can handle it.